Please go ahead, Zubair.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Dear brothers, sisters, guests, on behalf of the Muslim Association of Canada, we'd like to welcome you to Mac's virtual iftar with our very special guest today, Mayor John Tory. May Allah accept all of your fasting, your ibadah, and your efforts in this blessed month. I'm your co-host, Zubair Khan from Toronto, and with us today is my co-host, Sister Mariam Mana. And so we're going to start with a little introduction to MAC, the Muslim Association of Canada. For those of you who don't know, the Muslim Association of Canada, or MAC, is an independent, nonpartisan Canadian charitable organization. Our organization is devoted to educational, social, charitable, faith-based, and nonprofit work. MAC is a national, coast-to-coast grassroots organization. Nationally, we serve over 100,000 people annually. MAC has chapters in 13 cities, 18 centers and mosques, and 28 schools across Canada. We employ over 1,000 people. We have over 2,500 students in full-time schools and over 10,000 students in weekend schools. MAC is one of the largest Muslim associations in Canada. MAC believes that the personal development of every individual is the key to real and fruitful involvement in the community. It brings a balanced, constructive, and engaged understanding of Islam that aims to inspire Muslims in Canada. MAC's Toronto chapter has been serving the community for decades. Toronto is home to the esteemed Masjid Toronto on Dundas Street and also Masjid Toronto on Adelaide, which most of us are well familiar with. In addition to these institutions, MAC Toronto operates several schooling options for our community. These include Al Furqan full-time school, as well as several part-time schools across the GTA. Next on our agenda is a Quran recitation from one of our students, Brother Muhammad Khan. So I'm going to turn it over to him and he's going to give us a Quran recitation.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان فمن شهد منكم الشهر فليصمه ومن كان مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر ولتكملوا العدة ولتكبروا الله على ما هداكم ولعلكم تشكرون وإذا سألك عبادي عني فإني قريب أجيب دعوة الداع إذا دعان فليستجيبوا لي وليؤمنوا بي لعلهم يرشدون. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Ramadan is the month in which the Quran was revealed as a guide for humanity with clear proofs of guidance and the standard to distinguish between right and wrong. So whoever is present this month, let them fast. But whoever is ill or on a journey, then let them fast an equal number of days after Ramadan. Allah intends ease for you, not hardship, so that you may complete the prescribed period and proclaim the greatness of Allah for guiding you, and perhaps you will be grateful. When my servants ask you, O Prophet, about me, I am truly near. I respond to one's prayer when they call upon me, so let them respond with obedience to me and believe in me. Perhaps they will be guided to the right way.
Thank you, Brother Muhammad, for that beautiful recitation. For those of you that are just joining us right now, please make sure that if you do have any questions to put them in the queue at YouTube where you are watching. It's a pleasure to have you all here today with us. I'm honored to introduce to you our Director of Institutions and Fundraising, Brother Abdussalam Nakwa, who has a few words for our audience here today.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakumullah khair for joining us, and special thanks to Mayor Tory. I want to recognize Mayor Tory's public service and contribution to public life in Toronto and beyond. And I just want to remember we were in a gathering when during one of the campaigns, and one of the feelings around the room was that we need somebody with a steady hands on the wheel to steer the city into a better future. None of us was anticipating a pandemic at that time, and I think Toronto is grateful to have a leader of the qualities of Mayor Tory, who is really showing leadership and steady hands in a very difficult situation. And I think the whole country actually really grateful for his leadership. And public service is a great vocation, and something that we appreciate, and we pray for our leaders to be guided for what's best for everybody. And I really want to acknowledge the leadership of Mayor Tory in steering the city in a very, very difficult pandemic. And I think that meeting was in the Tory's building in downtown, the lawyers building. For MAC, MAC was founded some 20 years ago in the premise that a stronger presence for the Muslim community is needed for the community or for Canada. And today, by the grace of Allah, from Vancouver to Toronto to Montreal to everywhere in between, MAC has been making difference in the lives of all Canadians, and particularly Muslims, and every single day. And we take pride in being and touching our communities in various ways, and in making our communities spiritually vibrant and more resilient. And MAC envisions our community as a diverse, inclusive, and open to share its resources and ideas to enhance the quality of life to all Canadians. From providing a first-class daycare spaces to working mothers, to providing parents with top-tier educational options, whether full-time or part-time options to parents, and to ensuring that Muslims working in financial district in Toronto or in the oil fields in Cold Lake have a place to pray and to connect with community members and offer their prayers and their obligations towards God. And we take pride that with continuous effort over the years, we currently serve about 50 to 55 people weekly in various programs and activities. And from the start, the idea was to build capacity within the community to respond. And that premise was tested during this pandemic as well. And we are glad that we provided programs in a Pete's note that we went virtual to quickly offered similar programs that we were offering in our community centers and in our schools. We were able to address some of the immediate needs of our communities, whether in the food security, where we started the food share that expands around 8 to 9 chapters, serving so many of the needy of our community, whether needy by virtue of mobility, imposed by COVID, or by virtue of poverty. We were able to connect people through the Eid, virtual Eid, that connects people from across the country, serving at least 20,000 families were enjoying that. And that capacity is to respond is very critical for us, and that's the premise of our institution department, is to be able to serve communities where they are locally, have a strong local presence, and reach that with a national profile and national outreach that really can gather the collective voices and make them into a strong national voice. With that, I end my comments.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much, Brother Abdul Salam. And so with that, it's always a pleasure, Tory, to host you and to have you engage with our community, especially in these unprecedented times. You certainly have a lot on your shoulders and are carrying a great weight. We're all, I think I speak on behalf of the entire community, that we're extremely grateful. And furthermore, we're grateful for you to constantly keep us informed and up to date, engage with our community. We appreciate your time here today. So I'd like to turn it over to you, and maybe you can give us an address as well before we move into the questions and answers.
I will, for sure. And thank you, Zubair, very much. And assalamu alaikum, and Ramadan Mubarak to one and all. And I hope you've all been able to get through the day fasting today. I guess 2 years ago, and I guess because we haven't had Ramadan in the normal fashion the last 2 years, this year and last year, but 2 years ago, somebody asked me if I'd ever fasted before, and I said I had not, and so I did, and I came to realize the sacrifice and the discipline that is involved in that. When I went through a day and did it for real, like I didn't have a sip of water. I went through, and I came to realize, what an act of devotion it is to faith. And it's not just for a day; it's for, of course, a much longer period. And so I just I understand within that same context how disrupting it is for people to not be able to celebrate Ramadan in the way that you normally would. And indeed, this whole year has been a year for people who find great comfort and support for themselves in praying. That it's been very disruptive in terms of access to the mosques, and even just the Iftar dinners that, again, were a part of my life in Ramadan's past, during the time I've been mayor and before that. And as well, I just want to mention one other thing: get all the bad news out of the way at once. I mean, bad news that we can't pray and be together for Iftar dinners except for virtually like this. And I was reading, because tomorrow at the police board we're going to be considering the anti-hate crime activity in the city for the 2020 year. It's an annual report. And unfortunately, and I'm telling you something you already know, and something I know too, because I was at the mosque up at Yonge and Davenport. I was at different places. I came to Adelaide Street when that building was vandalized. And I just want to say that we are redoubling our efforts, and we've actually increased the size of that unit inside the police service. And we are going to be embarking on a much more aggressive educational campaign, because in the end, that's really what this is all about. I mean, it's all about educating people who are ignorant, frankly, in some cases. When I say ignorant, I don't mean to call them a name. I mean that they are ill-informed. And I have come to know, through my friendship with this community in particular, my neighborhood mosque is the MAC at what is it, Elizabeth and Dundas, and it's the one I probably visited most frequently, although I've been to many mosques across the city many, many times. And I've come to see in all of those visits and all of the different kinds of occasions I've seen in my work with the Muslim Welfare Association, the endeavors that MAC has in the community. Not just that it's part of the faith that's kind of written down in the Quran and elsewhere, that you should give back to your community and look after your fellow human beings. I've actually seen it being done. And I've seen, especially at Ramadan time in previous years, when we could have an Iftar gathering, that there was money being raised for the local hospital, or money being raised to provide for food security for people and so on. And I've seen how an ingrained a part this is of the faith. And I admire the faith in that respect so much. And I've come to have a great friendship with this community as I've learned more and more, and also seen the tremendous accomplishment and community contribution from the community, members of the community. So I'm not going to say much more. I want to answer your questions. Look, we've gone through a very tough time in the city. For me, I was on a number of these different question and answer things today, because there's a lot of these going on, some for Ramadan and other reasons. And people ask me, well, how it's been to be trying to manage during this time. And I said, well, it's like having two jobs, because I still have the job of kind of running the city and making sure that when you call the police department, or when you go to the park, or when you go on the transit system, that all still has to operate. We have to keep the finances in good order, which we've done. But then you have this whole other job that is actually much more demanding in its own way, because it's an emergency. where we're trying to not only manage the pandemic itself, but also then trying to embark on the largest vaccination campaign in the history of the city. And I'm sure you'll have some questions for me about that today too, but we're making progress on that. We've now had about 1 in 3 Torontonians that have received their first dose, which is quite a long distance to have come. But obviously when it's 1 in 3 and it's only the first dose, it means we have quite a bit left to do. But if there are suggestions or comments or criticisms that you have of how all that's going, and I know there are some questions I think that you have had submitted on that, I'd be more than happy to try and answer them and to take your suggestions as to how we can do better. But I just want you to know at this very special time of year, I admire you. I feel warmth every time I come to any mosque or Iftar or any other Eid celebration in the city. Anytime I have any encounter with this community at all, including in its charitable activities, with MAC in particular, I'm very aware of the tens of thousands of dollars of good works that you do. And it's not measured in money, it's measured in the amount of heart that's put into it. And there's a huge amount of heart that's put into this as a matter of faith and just as a matter of good citizenship. So I just want to thank you for that. And on with the questions so that we can take up time talking about what you want to talk about, not what I want to talk about.
Thank you, Mayor John Tory, for your address. So we've had a few questions for you today. So, a lot of folks are business owners here in the city of Toronto, and many are wondering if there's any additional supports available for them, given their prolonged closures. Their prolonged closures as other cities have not had the same length of closures for their businesses. So do you have, anything that you can share with them or any advice that you can share with our business owners here in the city of Toronto?
Miriam, thank you for that question and from wherever it came. And I'm sure there are many of the business people represented here. And I can see even when I drive home or when I'm out and about in the city, the number of store windows that are papered over, for example, and those are all small businesses, often owned by families and so on. Unfortunately, and this is not me making excuses, it's just stating the reality that the city governments, the way they're set up in this country, and this government, the one that I lead, is, I think, the 5th biggest government in the entire country, bigger than many provinces. But we're not treated like a province. We're treated in a way where the ability we have to raise money and therefore to finance, whether it's better childcare or whether it's assistance to business, is very limited. We only have sources of revenue that essentially are property taxes and commercial taxes. And those just don't produce the kind of income unless you raise them, hugely, that are produced by, say, the income taxes or the HST or the corporate taxes. So as a result, in order to put forward programs, because we couldn't just leave the business community kind of on its own and say, well, good luck, we don't have any money for you, we've had to rely on both the advocacy to and support from the other two governments. And I will say to you that unlike some areas where you advocate to them and they don't pay any attention to you, which is the way it goes sometimes in life, they have been extremely supportive of particularly smaller businesses. And so I will just commend to you programs I'm sure many of you have had to use during the pandemic, like the wage subsidy program, the rent relief program. The provincial government had kind of a grant program that was meant to look after other expenses like utility bills and so on. They've had some loan programs that are sort of loans that are forgivable depending on your circumstances over time. And I will say we've advocated strongly for those programs right back to the beginning. We've also advocated for them to be extended, which they have been. And in the most recent budget that was announced on what day is today? Tuesday, Wednesday, Monday. They extended those programs through to September. They're going to scale them down a little bit in July, so that it tries to reduce the dependency, say, on the wage subsidy program or on the other kinds of rent relief programs, but they're going to keep them in place to September. And I have no doubt, by the way, in case you're worried about the fact this may not be over in September, we all hope it will, that they would extend the program again if we were still in the midst of this pandemic. The programs the city has run have been more kind of practically oriented. So we, for example, ran a program called Digital Main Street, where we put 10,000 businesses online with a genuine, very professional e-commerce presence so they could sell their goods and be in touch with their customers. And we did it free of charge, using some of the expertise of corporations and students to help us with that. And we've done a lot of things like that. We're in the midst of creating now a small business tax class so that going forward on a permanent basis, smaller businesses in the city will pay a lower rate of commercial tax than bigger businesses do. So there's things like that we're doing, but that's the kind of thing we can do. I mean, we gave at the very beginning of the pandemic a tax deferral, but we couldn't even afford to waive taxes for a month or two because we just can't. I'll make this my last point. Our legal regime within which cities operate, including even one as big as Toronto, is that we cannot run a deficit. And I like that actually, because it forces us to make changes, those of us who are in the government, but we cannot run a deficit. So we can't just say when the pandemic hits and suddenly we fall way short of money because nobody's riding the transit and paying their fares anymore, that we're just going to let a deficit run up and put it onto the debt. We're not allowed to do that legally, and I'm glad of that. So it meant that our ability to waive taxes as opposed to deferring them for a couple of months was very limited, because we can't afford to give up that money or else we would fall into a deficit position. So we've been limited, but we've tried very hard to make sure we help people navigate through all the government programs that were available from the federal government and the provincial government, that we put in programs like Digital Main Street, that we are creating the small business tax class, that we deferred taxes back at the beginning of the year for a period of time, and generally try to support things in that way. And we will do that. We have even our Cafe TO program, which allows restaurateurs to put patios out onto the curb lane of the street. And that is something we're accelerating this year in terms of the time. We're inviting many more people to participate, and that's going to provide extra revenue opportunities for these businesses to hopefully earn during the summer. So I'm sorry we can't do more directly as a city government. We've advocated for a lot, and we've been quite successful in that. And I hope those programs have helped people, and I hope they will continue to help people for as long as they're needed.
Thank you for that. I'm going to go into the second question, which you touched on a little bit. A lot of folks are asking, given the stay-at-home order and the current situation that we're in our province, will it likely that we'll see some sort of normalcy in the summer? Will things start to get back, a little bit more in the summer? And just a follow-up question on that as well. When will millennials start to be able to, get vaccinated? We don't really have a clear timeline, and we're not sure if you, as the Mayor of Toronto, would kind of have an answer to that or approximation for us here.
Well, Miriam, on the question of when, and I think to use your expression was a very good way of putting it, some greater sense of normalcy or some expression like that, because that's the question. And we will not get back to normal, if you define normal as exactly the way it was, say, at the end of 2019, before we'd ever heard of a pandemic. We will not get back to that state, maybe ever, because there's going to be changes that are made, some of which might be seen as good, in that people will work from home more than they ever have before because they've proven they can. And you'll see things like that happen. But I think that on the things people are looking forward to, being able to go to a patio and have a bite to eat, or being able to go to a children's soccer game and the children can play soccer and the parents can watch, and being able to, kind of live those aspects of a normal life, I think you are looking at well into the summer. And I think it's just because, pardon me, here we sit at the end of April. Today, tragically, we had a very high number of cases, new cases, I think about 1,200. We had 27 deaths yesterday in one day. We had the highest day ever today for new hospitalizations and new admissions to the intensive care unit. So we're in the midst right now of this third wave that is proving to be very challenging, because of the fact it's the UK variant, and it spreads faster and is more easily transmissible. So it's a real problem. So I think what you're going to see, if we stay the course now and people follow the public health advice, and if we can really continue to ramp up the vaccines, and we'll get to that part of your question in a moment, by the summer, I think you'll see us back into a situation where, for example, outdoor dining is open again. The stores will be open, though maybe not completely open, but they'll be open with greater capacity allowed inside. People will be freer to have smaller gatherings, and maybe it'll be up to, and I'm speculating, but here, 10 people you could have in your backyard to have a little gathering in, say, July, as opposed to today, where you're not really allowed to have gatherings at all unless it's with your own family, even outside. So I think we'll be back to that. I think in terms of prayer services, you'll be back to maybe a higher number than today, where I think it's 10, which I realize is, almost zero is a better number than 10, because how do you decide which 10 people get to go to the mosque or whatever? So I think you'll see some of that normalcy come by the summer, but not before. And I think a lot of that will depend on how strict we are at following the rules and how successful we are. And we're doing very well at getting the vaccinations out. Now, with respect to the vaccinations, we started, and these were all rules set by the province in terms of the age limits, at 80 plus. And we've come down to, basically, for a majority of the places, it's now either 60 or 50 plus. That's still, like, of the people, I hate to base it on the people, but the people who died yesterday were between the ages of 55 and a half and 95 and a half. So that's the age range in which they fell. Nobody, thank God. I mean, it's tragic that anybody should die, but no 19-year-old or 23-year-old died. And it tends to be the case that while the young people are getting sicker faster from the variants, they don't get as ill because they're stronger. They're younger and stronger than, say, people of an older age bracket. So we've been gradually bringing the age down. The province actually makes those decisions at the end of the day because they are the ones that get to prioritize how the vaccine is allocated. And since the majority of the cases are still people who are 50 plus, the allocation of the vaccine, which has been in short supply, we don't have all that we could use. Our capacity, our ability to ramp up our capacity in the city-run clinics, by the way, is huge. Like we could double what we're doing now. We announced a 20% increase in capacity today because we got a little bit more vaccine. But I guess the point I'm trying to make too is we need a lot more vaccine to fully utilize our clinics. When we can fully utilize our clinics, we can expand the groups that come to get vaccinated in order. But you have to start with the people that are older because they are more likely to get sick. And so that's why today you see these limits at, say, about 50. We've taken it down to 40 for some of the hotspot neighborhoods. And some of the hotspot neighborhoods in a program that we announced today is taking it down to 18. And the theory of taking it down to 18 is in those neighborhoods, to be perfectly candid, many of the people, because they tend to be more marginalized neighborhoods, many of the people are living in multi-generational households. So it actually doesn't make any sense to say, well, grandma, who is 70 years old, can go and get vaccinated because she's 70, but then she goes home and she lives with 5 other people, including maybe her grandchildren and her children, adult children, who are not vaccinated because the age range didn't permit it. So where we're going into these hot zones, which are the areas that have been most badly affected by COVID-19, with the highest rates of hospitalization, the highest rates of ICU, and that's how we chose the neighborhoods. So next week, we're starting into 13 of those hotspots, and in those 13, the age will be 18 plus. And so we're gradually going to move to open up the age range as we have supply available to make sure we can deal with the people who need the help the most first, which is the older people who are more vulnerable, and then move into the other age brackets in the way that we're doing it on a gradual basis. So the answer is soon, starting with those 13 hotspots where 18 plus will be able to get it. And we've had quite a few of those already. And then gradually you'll see the age in the city clinics go from 50 to 45 to 40 to 35. And you'll see it come down as we have more and more appointments. We have 231,000 new appointments made available today for the month of early part of May till May 10th. And so those all have to be filled up with somebody, and some of it's going to be young people.
Thank you, John Mayor. Mayor John Tory. Before I turn over to my colleague Zubair, who has a couple more questions for you, I'd like to let our guests here know that they can ask any questions as well. We will allow that to open up once my colleague Zubair first asks the mayor his questions. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, just was on mute there for a second. Okay, so kind of changing topics here a little bit. Mayor Tory, so this one's on the topic of the task force in regards to combating Islamophobia. What can you tell us about what's been done so far to sort of keep the Muslim community aware and knowing sort of that this is happening?
Well, one of the things that we've realized we have to do more of, and we've realized it in the context of anti-Black, anti-Islam, and anti-Asian, East Asian racism and hatred, is that we've got to engage the community more in these consultative processes. One of the successes behind our Confronting Anti-Black Racism Action Plan was that we went out and talked to 800 people. And when I say 800, there was no magic number, except we had 44 different meetings, and a total of about 800 people came out to those meetings, and I went to quite a few. And we listened to average people, who were, in that case, members of the Black communities, but in this future case, members of the Islamic faith and members of the East Asian communities in Toronto. And what we're hearing back, and we're just going to be beginning a process of community discussion and consultation with the Muslim community, is that the main thing that people want us to do is, yes, to stand up and speak up and mount the kinds of campaigns we've done for our Toronto for All campaign, which had an anti-Islamophobia element to it about probably 2 years ago, but is to continue with that. We haven't done a phase yet, for example, on East Asian, anti-East Asian racism, and we're going to be doing that next. We've done it for Indigenous people, Muslims, Jewish people, and so on. But then the other thing they've said that should be our principal responsibility is education and enforcement. Enforcement is tougher because oftentimes when these acts of hatred and discrimination take place, they take place at a time when there are no police around, there's nobody around. So it becomes somebody saying, well, this happened to me, and it happened even if it was verbal abuse, and that doesn't make it better, but it means it's very difficult then for the police to get involved and sort of figure out what really happened and lay charges that could stick. And so they've told us in the anti-Black race groups and in the anti-East Asian, I had a round table on that, as I did for the Muslim community, that education is going to be the most important thing. I happen to have learned, starting with my first visit to a mosque, which was 20 years ago, I happen to have learned about the faith a little bit. I mean, I don't know as much as a Muslim would know, and I don't know much about the Quran, but I've read parts of it and understand about the importance of community engagement, about the importance of giving back, and about how, Ramadan itself, a huge feature of it is, giving to others. I've learned about what the prayer services are about, whereas there are those who would spread the notion that the prayer services are about pitting Canadians against each other. Far from that. Far from that. I mean, because I've been to Friday prayers so many times that I've heard for myself what is said. And I think we've got to educate a lot of the public about that, because there's a great misunderstanding about the difference between what I'll call international politics, which goes on all the time, involving all kinds of different groups and countries and so on, as we all know, and this faith of people who live here and pay their taxes and are your next door neighbor, the person who works next to you, the person who rides on the subway next to you, and good people. And so I think education is going to be a big part of that. And it's going to be education, not so much to the Muslim community. You understand your own faith. You may need to have a seminar on somebody else's faith to kind of fully understand them, which is the Toronto way. We've got to make sure the population at large, starting with kids, understand what Islam is all about and what it isn't all about, and the same with other faiths. So we're still at the early stages of this, and we have taken a step in the police service, I'm pleased to say, where we substantially ramped up the size of the hate crimes unit in the police service in a year when the police service got zero for a budget increase. So we found the money to increase the size, double the size of the hate crimes unit, so that a lot of those crimes that go either unreported or just can't be followed up have more resources to follow them up and make sure that that we bring those people to justice. So that's a start on what we're doing, and I can assure you I'm very committed to it, because I know all of these communities, and I know there isn't one of them that is based on, hatred of others or inciting trouble in Canada. Not one. Not faith. Interestingly enough, to me, I've learned enough to know by going to every place of worship that they all actually are founded on the same basic set of values. It's very interesting, because there have been differences over the years between them, but they all basically, believe in what I grew up calling the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And if you sort of focus on that fact, you can get a long way with people, getting along and living and learning from each other. I've learned a lot from your community, your faith community, over the years. A lot.
Thank you. Very, very much appreciated. Thank you for the detailed breakdown there. As an extension of that, could you maybe elaborate on what's being done to help Muslim youth stay engaged who might otherwise be feeling further marginalized?
Well, we tend to do it less by faith, although I can tell you, if you came forward with a program that you wanted to see us fund, we're very careful in the city, to be very honest, about funding things that are run by faith organizations, because it gets you into the whole business of sort of saying, well, should you then fund all the faith organizations if you fund some? But I can tell you, if there's a good community initiative that MAC, which does a lot of good works and charitable works in the community, or the Muslim Welfare Association, or any of these kinds of groups, were to sponsor, say, to help employ people in the summer, or to help with an after-school type program for kids in marginalized neighborhoods, we're applying most of the resources we apply in a disproportionate way to the marginalized neighborhoods. And look, let's be honest. I mean, I know that in places like Rexdale and sort of the north part of Etobicoke, and in places in Scarborough, in the north part of Scarborough, where there are marginalized communities, many disproportionately are people of the Islamic faith. And so, and they're newcomers to Canada, and they just haven't got themselves established yet. And many of them are Black, for example, and they're not often Black and Muslim at the same time, but there are people who are Muslim, there are people who are Black, there are far fewer people who are, white, as I am, and Christian. That's just the case. And that is where we're putting our resources for summer job programs, for employment assistance to help get people jobs. What we haven't yet done successfully, I will tell you, is we haven't yet connected the huge job opportunities that existed in the downtown in pre-pandemic times, like in the technology world, to some of these marginalized communities. I know in the Muslim community, even in some of the lower income houses in northern Etobicoke, there are a lot of smart kids that have finished high school. They probably even come through. I'll give you an example. The Somali community, I go to see the moms, and the moms there say to me, John, our kids stayed in school because we sort of made them stay in school when they maybe didn't want to, and they got through. They went to college and they got through and did quite well. And now they just can't find a job. And we read in the paper about all these jobs being created in Toronto. They're the hottest tech market in North America. And our kids have no connection to that. So we're trying to make an effort now to kind of cause those connections to occur, because we know there are kids who happen to be of the Muslim faith, but they happen to live in that part of town. They might also happen to have black or brown skin. It sometimes all fits together, but that isn't the point. The point is those programs are being put in place in those neighborhoods where the problems really exist. But if you came forward with a program that was in Thorncliffe Park, which also is a priority area, but if you came forward with a program you wanted to put on in there as a I'll call it a charitable organization, I don't, we would be most willing to entertain being of assistance in some ways with it. But there are many, many programs. In fact, the problem we've got at the moment is over the years, we've layered one program on top of another for the young people, and we have too many of them. And we're reviewing them right now to see which ones are the most effective ones at keeping people productively and in a fun way occupied with physical activity and homework clubs and recreational activities. Summer camps for kids, especially who are from lower income areas, recreational programs that operate year round, although it's hard at this time of year because a lot of these pools and things are closed right now. And it's especially for the kids who get them for free by and large in those neighborhoods that are marginalized. And that includes a lot of kids from your faith group, but a lot of kids otherwise who are not from your faith group. And they just have this struggle in their own household to be able to afford to do the things they should do as part of a healthy and positive life. We allocated, for example, Zubair, I think $3 or $4 million extra this year to provide for extra summer jobs in some of those marginalized communities. And the people that those are meant to go to are people some of you probably know, that are from some of these households that are really struggling, couldn't possibly find their way to get a summer job because it's very difficult, but they get a summer with a job we put forward for them. And it's not just about the job and the income, which helps the family, but it's also about the experience they get and a connection they make and the resume entry they have to say they had a job and they showed up to work and did a good job, which I know these kids can do. I've talked to these kids. They're as good as any other kids. They just need the chance. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Mariam, I think you had one there.
Yeah, so we have a kind of a two-part question for you here. Many mosques, including our MAC mosques across the country, have applied for, to become a mobile site for vaccinations. And we're just wondering on, progress with, are we able to get these sites available running in the city, or do we not have enough vaccines to be able to have new sites available?
The biggest problem that stands in the way of us, I would say we're operating, to be quite candid with you, at about probably 40% of the total capacity the city could run at in terms of mobile clinics, where we would have the manpower to have the people to give the injections and the people to know how to run the clinics and run the registration system. But we've been severely limited by supply. Our own clinics are running at about 37% of capacity, and we're running pop-ups as many as we can. And the problem isn't a shortage of locations. The problem is a shortage of supply. And so if somebody from MAC Toronto would like to just supply me with the list, I'm not saying I can kind of say, well, because I'm the mayor, I'm going to say the one at Dundas and Elizabeth is going to have a clinic. What I can say to you is I will make sure that they have, if that list is all together in one place, I'll make sure that they have seen all the different mosques that have applied so that they can use them. Because, and I'm not saying that just because I'm trying to make you feel better. I know for a fact that some of the Muslim adherents in some of the hotspot neighborhoods are at this point in time under-vaccinated. There are not as many who've come forward on their own for a variety of reasons to the city-run clinics to sign up and make an appointment and go and get vaccinated. We need the people in the community to get vaccinated. And so one of the ways in which we've learned, of course, that it helps is if you have it in a mosque people are familiar with, they're more likely to show up. If you have some community ambassadors from MAC that are going to go out to people and say, hey, like I got vaccinated, you should come and have this done, they're more likely to respond to that than hearing me say it. Even if they think I'm okay as mayor, they still feel better if one of their fellow congregants of the Muslim faith say it to them from their own mosque. They're going to feel better. So if you get me that list, I will make sure they take a look at it, because as supposedly, and I got my fingers crossed and I'm an optimist, the vaccine supply is supposed to ramp up quite dramatically in May. And it means we'll be able to have many, many more of these mobile clinics. And that then by having the list, I could sort of make sure that they were at least looking at the ones that are in hotspot postal codes. The first thing I'll do with it, by the way, just so you know, is I will take one of those yellow marking pens and mark the mosques that are in the hotspots, because we are starting with those for the reasons I mentioned earlier on. That's where the virus is spreading. And we have to start there and vaccinate those people first, because if we don't do that, we will not get through the pandemic. We'll vaccinate lots of people, but it'll still be spreading in those hotspot neighborhoods.
Thank you for that. Just the last part to my question. Some folks in the community are afraid of taking a specific vaccine, AstraZeneca. What do you have any thoughts on that? Any advice for community members?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'll tell you, not that this is going to be very persuasive to anybody, I took it. I mean, I had my injection and it was with AstraZeneca vaccine because that's the vaccine that was available to people in my age group at the pharmacy. And I can tell you I had 12 hours where I felt a little bit tired, which many people have said with many of the different vaccines, but otherwise I'm fine. And look, let's remember that in in Europe, for example, there are, I think, been 200 cases involving much younger people than me, more like your age, Miriam, that have had some issues with blood clots out of the tens of millions of people who've had the vaccination. They say, for example, that it is much more dangerous. Dr. Davila, our medical officer of health, gave some odds the other day and said it is a higher chance that an airplane will crash into your house than that you will end up with blood clots from AstraZeneca vaccine. She has said repeatedly, I'd be pleased to bring her to the MAC audience to speak on virtually like this, to say any vaccine is a good vaccine. They're all safe, they're all effective, and anyone that's offered to you, you should take it because they're safe. And I know there's been a lot of publicity about AstraZeneca, but it's just been overblown in the context of safety. Now, they have put an age restriction on it because they feel that maybe there's a slightly higher risk for younger women in particular. Well, fine, then everybody else can take it. And the age range for that, as you know, was just lowered. And they've been overwhelmed with people signing up, but it was just lowered to people 40 and above as of yesterday. And so that should open up the opportunity to get vaccinated sooner in a pharmacy to people who are 40 years plus, and it's perfectly safe. I mean, do you think, not that it matters what I do, but do you think I'm going to take a vaccine at my stage in life as a father and a grandfather and the mayor and have somebody saying to me, well, we're not too sure about that. They assured me when I asked, and I did reading on it too, that it is 100% safe. And there's lots of information about it on the Toronto Public Health website. And we put on some seminars, and I'd be pleased even to see if you thought it was of broad interest to the Muslim community in Toronto. We put on seminars for the Black community about points of hesitation about getting vaccinated. And we found that when we surveyed the people before and after the seminar, people were like 75% more likely to get vaccinated after the seminar because we dispelled a lot of the myths that are out there about vaccinations. So if you need any help with that, we have very smart people who would be more than pleased to come and talk, I'm sure, virtually like this, so a big audience could listen to what they had to say about the safety of these vaccines and how, leaving aside the safety question, which is one that's not really debated by anybody, you also, by getting vaccinated, protect yourself, your family, your fellow workers, your fellow people that you see at Friday prayers, your relatives from and protect yourself from the virus. I mean, it's just something that's so sensible to do.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mayor Tory. So the next question actually is around vulnerable populations. So we're always concerned about the most vulnerable members of our community during this pandemic in particular, especially having been so prolonged and such prolonged closures. What's in place to help them, and where should they go?
Well, I mean, the best thing they could do if they are in need of supports is to call either 311 or 211. Now, 211, we focused more on mental health during the pandemic, and that's one thing that people probably don't even know about. If you're feeling stressed and mental health concerns, we put together the best mental health resources we could find. And when you call, you don't just get some voicemail or something like that. You get transferred directly to a person, a live person who might be a person who is Muslim and may understand the particular frame of reference of a person of that faith in having a mental health issue, or they might be specializing in seniors' mental health or in young people in mental health. And calling 211, we've had hundreds of thousands of calls since the pandemic began. We put in place all kinds of food security programs with cultural, what's the word I'm looking for? Cultural appropriateness, cultural sensitivity in terms of the food. We've used the library branches to be the kind of staging station for a lot of that food security programming to be done. We've had programs for seniors to look in on each, like having people look in on seniors who normally would go out because they're well enough to go out, but they're effectively told not to go out now because they're at risk and they're 75 years old. So we have just a host of support programs, and that includes, by the way, a vaccine transportation equity program. So if you have trouble getting to the vaccine clinic, we have a program for people who are from harder hit communities to get to the vaccine clinic. We have all kinds of programs like that are probably not publicized as well as they should, although we've translated them into 39 different languages and put them out online and in various brochures and so on. So I would say if you have doubt, the best place normally to call to get help with something you need is your city councilor's office. That's what they're there for. And they have a staff that is there that's very knowledgeable about different kinds of supports offered by social service groups, by the city, by somebody else. The next best place to call is probably either 311 or 211. 211 is about support services you need, including mental health. 311 is about things you need where maybe a tree branch has fallen down in your house, or things like that the city can help you with. But I think those are the principal places you would go. And we have all kinds of programs, as I said, food security, seniors, vaccine transportation equity, vaccine equity generally, COVID equity in terms of supporting people with different needs they have in their families during the pandemic period. We have a lot of programs for just about everybody that might be vulnerable. That's been our whole objective during this pandemic, is to make sure the people who are the most vulnerable got the most help, because we knew they needed the most help. And we knew even at the beginning that they would be disproportionately affected by COVID-19 because they're lower income people. They live in those multi-generational small apartments with 6 people. They work in close quarters in essential jobs very close to each other, where you're going to get more likely to get COVID. So that's why we focused a lot of our programs on vulnerable communities.
Fantastic. Wanted to say that we appreciate you. You've been kind of answering a rapid fire series of questions over the last half hour, and time's really just flown by. What we're going to do is we're going to continue taking questions from the community, but I'm also going to open it up to the other panelists here. So you do have a little raise hand function at the bottom of your screen. Certainly feel free to raise your hand and ask a question to Mayor Tory. So we have Abdul Salam, Dr. Weil, and others here as well. Please do feel more than welcome. Okay, this one from Tina. I think you had your hand up, right?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Tory. As I hear you talk, and I also see you on CP24 quite regularly, coming in and addressing the community sincerely. Just wanted to know, what do you do to take care of your sanity and just be at peace of mind during all these crazy bombardments that you do? And like Abdul Salam was saying, honestly, we feel very grateful. Sincerely, personally, I feel very grateful for everything that you've done and you're doing. But just, in the spirit of Ramadan, I know you fasted once, as you said, but what do you want to share with us? How do you keep together to drive the car?
I mean, that's like a really good question, because if you ask me if I have some kind of a program, like a lot of people would do it through prayer, other people would do it through exercise, other people would do it through, different means. And I'm blessed with the ability, I guess, because I've had the experience of being in leadership positions for the last 25 years of my career, to be able to handle problems in a sort of fairly calm way. I mean, and that's the key, is to stay calm. To stay rested, which I try to do. I never slept much anyway. I sleep 5.5 hours a night, even when it's not a pandemic. So this has not been any different. But we all need our support systems, and I have family and friends who are very supportive of me. And I have, like, my oldest friend, who I've known since I was 5 years old, so most of my life. He writes to me when he says I look tired on television, and you need somebody that's going to do that. My wife does that too, and but she's careful when I come home not to say I look tired, because she doesn't want me to feel bad. But my family, my kids, my grandchildren, I mean, they're all a part of that support system. And part of the problem a lot of people have had, not just me as mayor, is that I haven't seen I've seen them at a distance, like literally seen my grandchildren, but not picked them up and hugged them. And those hugs, what are those worth? Those hugs, in terms of re-energizing you when you've had a bad day from one of your grandchildren. I have 5 grandchildren, a 6th one on the way. I haven't had one of those hugs for, basically 12 months. The same with my children. I mean, I see them, but at an appropriate distance. And it's been stressful for a lot of people for that exact reason. But I just have to keep myself calm and realize that other people are depending on me. And you have to have a position like mine, or like Mr. Ford has, or Mr. Trudeau, to understand how much you have a feeling that people are relying on you, and therefore you stay calm and you stay fixed on your job, because you know how many people are relying on you to get it right. And I don't get it right all the time, of course. And I thought one of the most valuable things I could do, and I've done a lot of it, as you pointed out, during the whole of the pandemic, is to go on television and just answer people's questions. And I think at the beginning, there were a lot more questions than there are now, but there's still a lot of questions about how do you get vaccinated, or how do you do this, or how do you do that? And I think just by giving people the best answers I can, I don't have answers to every question, it can reassure people. And when I see people that are reassured and I see things that are getting better, they're not getting better fast at the moment, but when they are getting better, that makes me feel better. I'm much calmer. So I haven't given any. I mean, I don't take drugs. I don't smoke. I don't, drink a lot. Like I just sort of do my job. I have a support system of family and friends and a great staff at City Hall, by the way. The people down there are completely dedicated to what they do. So they help the elected leader to do his job. And that's it. I can't explain anything more. I don't have any other particular system or magic potion. I just try to stay calm because I know people are depending on me, including my own family.
Thank you so much.
Very inspiring, Mayor Tory. So Mariam, I think you had a question from the community, but I know also Brother Walid has his hand up as well. Maybe we'll go with Brother Walid first, and then Mariam, I think you had another question there. And we'll probably have to wrap up after that, I think, with just looking at the time. So Brother Walid, it's you.
So I just have a small question regarding our contribution. We are a community organization, and in the root of our faith, we need to help others. It's one of the basic things that we need to, especially in Ramadan. It's the majority of us would like to be doing more of this, general good deeds. And our question is that what we can do to help the city, or what's need help in the city, or that we can introduce to help people, especially that we have a big base of volunteers.
Let me tell you two things that I think about. One of them is I think you should frankly make better known to people the things you're doing now. I look at that, and I'm more familiar with the Muslim Welfare Association, for example, and they come down to Regent Park. They're from way up in Scarborough. They come down to Regent Park every weekend and bring down food and sandwiches and meals for seniors and so on. And most of the people they bring meals for are not Muslim. They're just people who are struggling. And I know MAC does that too. And I just think that you should, a lot of the faith communities, they're not doing it because they want people to make them popular. They're doing it because I guess they just want to make sure people know that they are following the fundamental tenets of their own faith by looking after others. And I think the Muslim community, it is getting better. Like MAC is one of the organizations that's much better. The IMO is a good organization out by the airport there at telling people what they're doing and making sure the rest of the community is even invited to take part. Like come and work with us to deliver meals to seniors or to help young people that are struggling or whatever. So I think that is something that you should do more of, to integrate yourselves more completely into the rest of the community and go and, people, there's very little, and I'm just being very honest with you because I really love this community, this faith community. There are very few people from the Muslim and Islamic faith, the Muslim community, who get involved in things like the United Way. And you may say, well, that's not our deal or whatever. The United Way is an organization that welcomes everybody. It serves everybody. And we need more representation from the Islamic faith in things like the United Way and in the hospitals. Like I was at something that the Muslim community put on, and they raised, I think $100,000 in one night. I gave 1,000. I know that. So that night for the Scarborough Hospital, it was a wonderful, wonderful thing. And you cannot believe how much it was appreciated by that hospital, that the Muslim community in the Scarborough area put on that event to raise money for the hospital. And I think there have to be more things like that done, where you're getting involved in mainstream things that are of service to your own members, because that's the hospital that a lot of the Scarborough Muslims are going to go to if they get sick. So why wouldn't you want to support it? But it's then recognized as well, though, that you stepped forward and did this. And then the second thing I would do is focus hard on some of the marginalized communities. There are many people of your own faith, of course, who live in those communities. And right now we have had a growing number of people in the city who are marginalized. And that means they're underhoused, they're underemployed, they're struggling with their kids. They might be single parent led households. They've got many, many things that have them sort of behind the eight ball, and decide you're going to do some things because it's totally consistent with your faith to support those communities. To have a project to raise some money, or to have a project to go in and mentor the kids, or run a homework club for them. And I just think these are things you can do, because I know how generous this community is. I know the quantities of money that are raised during Ramadan for the chosen charities is extraordinary, but nobody knows about this. It's a little told story. I go and tell it all the time because I want people to think of the Muslim community for what they are, not for what they think they are. And I think most people don't have bad thoughts, but they have things they see in the media that cause them to believe that sometimes things are different than they actually are. So that's the best advice I could offer. Get involved in some of these institutions that serve your community as well, your faith community, and take some of the work you do presently to support those kinds of institutions and make a bigger deal of it. Have people know about it. Invite them to come and do it with you. You do a lot.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mayor Tory. So we're gonna have one last question, and this one comes from Brother Abdul Salam Nakwa. He's gonna step in and ask this final question before we go to closing remarks.
Yes, Mayor Tory, I believe I heard you speak about this even before the pandemic, but what the pandemic exposed is the affordable housing and the importance of the housing file. Does the city have any special programs for that? We would love to be part of this solution, but we realize that's one of the areas that really need attention from everybody.
So it's not an example that's entirely applicable, Abdul Salam, but it is an interesting thing for you to think about. The United Church recently, they have a different challenge than you have. I mean, you have too many people sometimes coming to Friday prayers. There is no such thing as too many people, but you sometimes don't have the parking and the space to accommodate all the people that come. They had a lot of churches from days gone by that were not in full use anymore. So they set up a separate corporation to take some of the land that is attached to their churches, and they are going to come forward to the city and the province and the federal government and say, we as a community want to build some affordable housing for, it can't be restricted to people of a given faith, but by and large, most of the people who would end up living there would be people, say, who would be Muslim or Jewish or this or that. And in so doing, they're helping us with the effort to get more affordable housing, and they're providing affordable housing for some of the people of their faith groups and other groups that are seniors, for example, where everybody wants to build more seniors housing. So I would urge you to take a look at doing something like that. And in the past, back in the 1970s, one of the most successful programs was a program where the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation made financing, low-cost financing available to church groups. And they knew, and they were right, that the church groups would provide stable, well-run, well-administered housing that would look after mainly seniors from that faith group. And those buildings, I could take you to them today. They're still standing there in beautiful condition. They've been well looked after. The faith communities are very proud of those places. And mostly the people who live in there are people of that faith, not entirely. And so I would say to you, you might want to think there's no reason why an organization like a MAC with a sort of, say, a housing subsidiary or a housing affiliated organization can't apply if you have some, maybe partner up with a nonprofit housing organization, can't apply to have a housing project built on a piece of your own land, or even bid on the ones that we have built on our own land. But in the meantime, all we're doing is substantially ramping up. So we now have about 6,000 affordable housing units either under construction or in the final approval process, which is way more than we had before. That's affordable housing. There's many thousands of other housing units that are being built. We're moving into the realm of affordable home ownership, which simply takes the same money to subsidize the cost of a mortgage instead of the cost of rent. And there are many, many programs for which you could probably be a partner with a nonprofit housing organization that knows the housing business better than you might, to put something together that is a benefit to your community, but also a benefit to the city. Because the more affordable housing we can have for seniors or otherwise, the better. So I would say that if you want to talk to some people at City Hall, we can hook you up and you can find out where those partnerships might exist and in what parts of town where you have a large population of people of the Islamic faith.
Great.
Thank you, Mayor Tory, for taking the time to speak to our community today. Just given the time right now, I think we're going to conclude our program. I'm going to ask Dr. Wael to make a dua to end our program with today. And for any folks that have any questions, we're happy to send them to the mayor's office, and I'm sure they'll be able to answer your questions there.
And I will come back another time for sure.
For sure. It's always a pleasure and delight to have you here. We're always looking forward to having virtual programming and hopefully in the future in-person programming. All right, Dr. Wael, if you can take it away.
Assalamu alaikum, Ramadan Mubarak, everyone. Respected Mayor Tory, it's a pleasure to see you and to have you with us tonight. So I will be leading the prayers, supplicating God for the well-being of all, for the end of the pandemic, for the protection of all. So, Bismillah. In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate, all praise is for God and peace be on all of his prophets. Oh God, we supplicate to you at this hard time while we fast the holy months of Ramadan. Oh God, make our fasting the fastest of those who fast sincerely, the prayers of those who pray obediently, and have mercy on us and forgive us. Oh most merciful God, we give thanks for all those who work day and night to fight this deadly pandemic, for all medical professionals, police officers, for all the frontline workers who risk their well-being and the well-being of their families out of love for their neighbors, for grocery workers, for truck drivers, and for all those who work to provide for our daily needs, for the teachers, parents, school children who are working daily to find ways to teach and learn, for leaders of our governments, businesses, organizations, and faith communities, and all who have had to make difficult decisions in the midst of this uncertainty. Grant them and us all guidance, compassion, wisdom, and patience that we need to survive this hard time and to come out of it stronger as a more faithful people, as a more just global society. O living, O sustaining God, in your mercy we seek relief from the pain and suffering in this world. O God, we ask you for your love and the love of those who love you and the deeds that will bring us your love. O God, you are peace, and from you comes peace. Blessed are you, the majestic and the most generous. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wet, for that beautiful dua, and we hope to recover our communities and hope to a brighter days. Hopefully, that the summer is coming now. Thank you, John, Tory, so much for joining us today, and thank you to our esteemed panelists for being with us today, and to our community members who have joined us live. We thank you for taking the time to join us as well. It's been a pleasure having you all today. This concludes our program for the day, and we look forward to hosting John Tory again for another event in the future. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Ramadan Mubarak to all. Thank you. Thank you, Miriam.